He promised her future, then spent it on his midlife crisis. Madison had done everything right. Straight A's, perfect SATs, and acceptance into an Ivy League university. Her whole life had led to that one golden moment, but when it was time to pay her tuition, she discovered the college fund was gone. Her father had drained it to buy a luxury yacht. And her mother? Your dream can wait, sweetie, but your father needs this now. They stole her future and thought she'd just stay silent. Have your parents ever put themselves first, no matter the cost to you? If this story hits close to home, let us know in the comments. And if you believe justice can take years but always finds a way, hit like and subscribe for more family revenge stories. I was always the gifted kid, not in the spoiled prodigy on a pedestal way, more like, we invested in you, so you better make it worth it. My name's Madison, and I was raised in a house where love was conditional and achievement was currency. My parents weren't poor. In fact, we had a solid upper-middle-class life in Connecticut. My dad, Ron, ran a mid-sized landscaping company, and my mom, Teresa, was a high school math teacher. Respectable, stable, and to outsiders, perfectly normal. But inside our house, nothing was ever given freely. Praise had to be earned. Mistakes were met with guilt trips. And everything I had, from piano lessons to new shoes, came with the subtle reminder, we're doing this for you. Don't waste it. By the time I was 12, I had already internalized the deal. Make them proud, and maybe, just maybe, I'd deserve their love. So I excelled. Straight A's, National Honor Society, science fairs, internships, volunteering. I didn't party, didn't date. I studied like my life depended on it, because it kind of did. Every year, my dad would say, all this will pay off when you get into a top college. We've got a fund ready just for you. The college fund. It became a mythic symbol in our house. My reward, my one guaranteed return on a lifetime of effort. So when I got into Yale, I thought I'd finally made it. My parents acted proud at first, throwing a little dinner party, inviting the neighbors. My mom even said, we always knew you were meant for more. But a few weeks later, things shifted. I asked my dad about wiring the deposit, just a portion to secure my spot. His response? We'll talk about it this weekend. That weekend turned into 2 weeks, then 4. And finally, one summer morning, I walked into his office with the acceptance letter in hand, trying not to shake. Dad, I said, Yale's deadline is next Monday. I need to pay, or I lose the spot. Nay. He looked up from his laptop and sighed, like I was asking something terribly inconvenient. Then he said the words that changed my life forever. Madison, the fund's gone. Gone? I laughed, thinking it was some kind of dry joke, but his face didn't change. He leaned back in his leather chair and said, I used it, bought the boat. That's been a dream of mine for years. And when that sale popped up, it just made sense. I was frozen, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. I turned to Mom, hoping this was some twisted prank, but she just gave me this tight smile and said, Sweetie, sometimes dreams have to wait. Your father needs something for himself right now. You'll find another way. Another way? After years of doing everything they asked, sacrificing my childhood, my sleep, my sanity, they took everything I had worked for and tossed it into the ocean. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just packed a bag and walked out. No college, no plan, no support. The worst part? They didn't chase me. Not even a text, just silence. So I did what they never expected. I got a job. 3, actually. Waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night, coding online between shifts. I taught myself software engineering from scratch, worked for startups, failed twice, slept in a car for 6 months. But I kept going. And 15 years later, I was no longer Madison, the girl with the shattered dream. I was Madison Lane, CEO of a tech startup valued at $42 million. But just when I thought I'd buried my past, my toxic parents came knocking. Their company was failing, their debts were piling up, and now, suddenly, they needed me. They wanted a loan, a second chance. But this time, I had the power. It had been 15 years since I left that house. 15 years since I watched my father walk across the driveway to his brand new yacht, smiling like a kid at Christmas, while my acceptance letter to Yale sat torn in a trash can. And for 15 years, I made sure I never needed them again. Not for money, not for approval, not even for closure. I built everything with my own hands. My company, my name, my self-worth. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I rose from it, but I hadn't seen them since. Until the day I walked into my office and saw them sitting in my lobby. My receptionist was visibly confused. "There's a Mr. and Mrs. Lane here. They say they're your parents?" I froze. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, or maybe a prank. But when I stepped into the glass-walled waiting area, there they were. Older, of course. My dad's hair now completely gray, my mom thinner than I remembered. But it was them, sitting nervously in their pressed clothes like strangers. My first instinct was to walk away, let security escort them out, but I didn't. Something inside me, curiosity, maybe anger, told me to face this. I nodded once. "Send them in." They walked into my office like they were entering church, quiet, guilty, reverent. My dad looked around at the sleek interior, the awards on the shelf, the framed Forbes feature on my wall. He gave a tight nod, as if suddenly realizing what he had thrown away. "I didn't know you were doing this well," he muttered. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a seat. I just said, "Why are you here?" My mom jumped in like she always did when things got tense. "Madison, sweetheart, we didn't want to come like this, but we're in a difficult situation." My dad cleared his throat. "My company's in trouble. The economy, the competition, it's been brutal. We're close to losing everything." My arms crossed. "You want money." They both nodded. No shame, no apology, just expectation, like they had the right to ask. And that's when it hit me. They hadn't changed, not in 15 years. Still treating me like a resource to extract from, a backup plan, a return on investment. My success, to them, wasn't a triumph. It was a tool, something to be used. I could feel the fire rising, but I kept my voice calm. Cold. "You came to your daughter, who you abandoned, who you stole from, to buy a boat, and now you want her to bail you out?" My dad's jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "No, you know what's not fair?" I snapped. "Missing out on the college education I earned, sleeping in a car because I had no family to turn to, working 3 jobs while you were drinking cocktails on your precious yacht." My mom's eyes welled up. "Madison, please. We made a mistake, but you're in a position to help now. You've made something amazing of yourself." "And you think I owe that to you?" I laughed. "No, I made this despite you, not because of you." They looked stunned, like it was the first time anyone had ever spoken to them that way. That was the moment. Not just when I realized I didn't owe them anything, but when I stopped pretending I still needed to earn their approval. I stood tall, finally feeling the power shift between us. The years of guilt, manipulation, and quiet resentment crumbled in an instant. I walked over to the window, letting the silence hang thick. Then I turned around and said the words that changed their lives. "I'll help, but on one condition." They both leaned forward. "You sell the yacht." Dead silence. "What?" my father said, almost choking. "You heard me. Sell the thing you traded my future for. Prove to me that your ego isn't more important than your family. Then we'll talk." My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My dad's face turned a dark red. "That boat is part of our lifestyle. It was more important than my education," I cut in. "So now it's the price for your survival. Simple." They didn't answer. They just stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Not as their obedient daughter, but as someone who held all the cards now. I picked up my phone. "If you're not willing to make that sacrifice, this meeting is over." My dad stood up, fists clenched. "You've changed." "No," I said, meeting his glare. "I've just finally stopped letting toxic parents define me." He stormed out. My mom lingered a second longer, her eyes filled with something between shame and fear. Then she followed. The door shut behind them with a satisfying click. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of my justice. Kitsch ban. Dad took my college fund to buy a boat. They thought I would say no, that I would slam the door in their faces and that would be the end of it. But I wasn't looking for closure. I wasn't looking for justice handed to me on a silver platter. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to lose something they cherished as much as I once cherished my future. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about value, what they valued more than their daughter, and how easily I could take it from them. I started with research. Their landscaping company, Lane & Sons, had once been a small-town success. Now it was hemorrhaging money. The business was over-leveraged, the equipment outdated, and the market saturated. According to public financials, they were 4 months behind on vendor payments, and the bank had already flagged them for default. But what caught my attention was something else. They had listed the yacht, the Silver Promise, as a business asset. Interesting choice. That meant it was vulnerable. And more importantly, traceable. I called my attorney and arranged for a formal investment proposal, not as a daughter helping her parents, but as a private equity firm exploring acquisition of a struggling business. I created a shell company under a name they wouldn't recognize. I even hired a consultant, an old colleague, to pose as the face of the firm. I wouldn't show my hand just yet. The proposal? We'd offer to buy Lane & Sons at a generous valuation, only if the yacht was sold and the proceeds were reinvested into the company. A win-win, on paper. Within a week, I got an email from my fake consultant. Your father refuses to sell the yacht, says it's non-negotiable. I smiled. I expected that. So I took a different route. I reached out to the marina. The Silver Promise was docked in a luxury slip that cost nearly $4,000 a month, an absurd expense for someone on the verge of bankruptcy. I spoke with the dockmaster and discovered that they were already behind on payments. I made a quiet offer to cover the outstanding balance in exchange for temporary lien rights. Marina policy allowed it. After 90 days unpaid, the vessel could be held until fees were recovered. Within days, I legally blocked the yacht from leaving the dock. My parents, of course, had no idea it was me. I watched from a distance as my father posted angry Facebook rants about unfair business regulations and jealous competitors. My mother messaged a few of my old friends asking if I could just talk to him. But I stayed silent. Let them stew. Next, I started whispering through town. I reached out to small vendors and former employees who were still owed money by Lane & Sons. Quietly, anonymously, I encouraged them to pursue collections, offering to help with legal filings and document prep through a local business recovery fund I'd set up months ago under a different name. Lawsuits started trickling in. Meanwhile, I continued the shell company acquisition dance. This time, we offered a smaller sum, but with one very public requirement: a formal apology letter to be issued by the owners of Lane & Sons, acknowledging past mismanagement and promising transparency. Again, the yacht had to go. And again, my father refused. That was his line in the sand. He would lose his company. He would drown in lawsuits. He would burn through their retirement. But that yacht, the one he bought with the money that was meant to send me to Yale, he would not let it go. That told me everything I needed. My father didn't see me as a person. He never had. I was a project, a reflection, a trophy when convenient, and a burden when not. My mother was complicit, not with words, but with silence. Every time she said, "Just let it go," or "Don't stir things up," she chose comfort over me. They were more than toxic parents. They were thieves of potential, and now they were facing the mirror I'd held up. But the revenge wasn't complete yet. The yacht still sat there, floating, untouched, pristine, mocking. It was time to sink something, metaphorically, of course. They tried to hold out. For weeks, my father refused to bend. Even as lawsuits piled up and the marina placed an official lock on the dock access, he kept the same smug posture, refusing to sell the boat, refusing to acknowledge any fault. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling. One morning, my consultant forwarded a voicemail accidentally left by my dad after a heated phone call. I played it on speaker. "This is ridiculous, Teresa. We built that company from nothing. That girl owes us her existence, and now some firm wants to take it from us if we give up the only thing I have left over my dead body. There it was again. That delusion, that belief that I somehow owed them for raising me, like parenting was a loan I'd never finish repaying, like draining my college fund was just a business decision. But this time, the world wasn't bending to his ego. The vendors were pushing, the lawsuits were moving forward, and his last source of dignity, the yacht, was now a floating symbol of defeat, immobilized, useless, mocked. The final move came when I arranged for a local news station to accidentally pick up on the story. Not about me, about them. A struggling local business owner clinging to $1 million yacht while owing thousands to ex-employees and mom-and-pop contractors. It spread fast. Local blogs, Twitter, Facebook, the headline, "Company drowning in debt while owner refuses to sell yacht named the Silver Promise." Even people who didn't know the details were outraged. Former clients started leaving one-star reviews. A few ex-employees did interviews about unpaid wages. And through it all, I stayed invisible. I didn't need credit. I didn't need a confession. I just wanted the same thing they gave me years ago, a lesson they'd never forget. The pressure finally cracked them. One Friday afternoon, I got an email. No subject. No salutation. Just 5 words. "The boat has been listed." I stared at the screen, barely breathing. They'd finally surrendered. A week later, the Silver Promise was gone, sold at a fraction of its value to cover debts they never planned to pay. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate. But I did sit by the marina that night, watching the empty slip where the yacht once rested, and for the first time in years, I felt clean. My parents didn't call, didn't thank me, but I knew what they were feeling. Powerless. Exactly how I had felt the day they threw away my future for a boat they thought would make them feel whole. Have you ever dreamed of watching toxic parents face the consequences of their own cruelty? If Madison's revenge made you smile, leave a comment below with your favorite moment. And don't forget to like this video. For more family revenge stories where justice takes its time but never misses, subscribe now. The boat was gone. Their business was bleeding. Their reputation shattered. But there was still one thing left unresolved, the truth, and I needed them to say it, out loud. They had taken everything from me, and for years they'd rewritten the story, to themselves, to others, maybe even to each other. They called it a misunderstanding, a mistake, a necessary sacrifice. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, one they made with full clarity, and I needed to hear them admit it. So I invited them to lunch, not as their daughter, but as a businesswoman. I booked a private room at a high-end restaurant in town, a place they used to talk about when I was younger, somewhere they could never afford now. I chose the table by the window, set for 3. I wore a navy blue blazer, no makeup, no softness, just clarity and control. They arrived late, of course. My father walked in first, posture rigid but unsure. My mother followed behind, avoiding my eyes. "Madison," she said softly, like we were strangers meeting for the first time. In a way, we were. I gestured to the seats. "Please, let's talk." They sat, awkward and stiff, eyes darting toward the waitstaff, the windows, anywhere but me. "I want to be clear," I began, my voice even. "This isn't about money. You already sold the yacht. You've lost the business. I'm not here to make demands." My father crossed his arms, guarded. "Then why are we here?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Because I want to hear the truth, and I think you need to hear it too." My mother looked away. I leaned forward. "Let's stop pretending this was all a misunderstanding. You didn't forget the college fund. You used it. You chose a boat over my future, and then you justified it, blamed stress, timing, circumstance, but you never apologized, never admitted what it really was. Selfishness." My father's jaw tightened. "We did what we thought was best at the time." "No," I interrupted. "You did what was best for you, and you knew it." He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I don't need excuses. I don't even need an apology anymore. I just want you to say it. For once in your lives, just say what you did." The room went still. My mother's lips trembled. "We didn't think you'd walk away. We thought you'd forgive us, that you'd come back." I shook my head slowly. "And what exactly was I supposed to come back to?" She didn't answer. Then, for the first time in all these years, my father's voice dropped. Not angry, not defensive, but tired. "I bought the boat because I felt like I deserved something. I was turning 50. I was losing my grip on everything. And you getting into Yale, it made me feel small, like I was being left behind. So I made a choice. A bad one." It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was the truth. A selfish man, jealous of his own daughter's success, had stolen her future to soothe his ego, and a complicit wife had let him. I looked out the window, letting the moment breathe. They weren't monsters, just toxic parents who never saw me as a full person, only an extension of their dreams, fears, and regrets. And now they had nothing left to cling to but the past. I could have walked away after that lunch. I had my closure. My revenge was complete in silence. But something still lingered, because for years my parents had told their version of the story, that I was ungrateful, that I'd abandoned the family, that I ran off over a little misunderstanding. They told everyone who would listen, from church friends to old neighbors, that I was cold, selfish, and too proud to forgive. And now, the truth sat quietly between us in a private dining room, but it deserved a bigger stage. 3 weeks later, our town held its annual Small Business Forum, an event where local owners gave talks, panels were hosted, and awards handed out. I'd been invited to speak for years. I'd always declined. This time, I accepted. My keynote was slotted as the closing talk. The title I gave them? The Cost of Silence. The auditorium was packed. Dozens of business owners, reporters, some of my old teachers, even the mayor. And of course, my parents, sitting in the third row. They had no idea what was coming. I stepped onto the stage, took a breath, and told my story. Everything. From the day I got my Yale acceptance letter to the moment I found out the fund was gone. The yacht, the betrayal, the silence. Gasps echoed through the room. People turned to whisper. I saw my father shift uncomfortably. My mother stared at the floor. Then I paused and said, "Toxic parents don't always scream. They don't always hit. Sometimes they just steal quietly, your joy, your voice, your future, and they'll tell everyone you're the one who left. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is come back and tell the truth." There was silence. Then a slow ripple of applause, building until the entire room was on its feet. I didn't look at my parents again. I didn't need to, because now the whole town knew. The narrative had shifted. The pity, the admiration, the respect, none of it belonged to them anymore. It belonged to me. They weren't just facing business failure or financial ruin anymore. They were facing public accountability, and that, more than anything, was something they could never control. After the speech, people approached me in waves. Some offered congratulations. Others quietly whispered their own stories about fathers who gambled their tuition money, mothers who manipulated with guilt. There was a strange comfort in realizing how not alone I was. But the most unexpected part came 2 days later. A letter, handwritten, folded into a plain white envelope with no return address, slipped under the door of my office. It was from my mother. "We didn't realize the weight you were carrying all these years," she wrote. "We told ourselves a story that made us feel better, but you told the truth. Maybe that's the bravest thing a daughter can do. We won't ask for your forgiveness, just your peace." There was no apology. Not really. But for the first time, it didn't make me angry. It just felt final. I didn't write back. A month later, their business officially closed. Lane & Sons filed for bankruptcy. Their house went on the market shortly after, and I heard from a neighbor that they moved to a small rental 2 towns over. Quiet, unremarkable. And me? I kept going. But with new boundaries. I blocked their numbers. Set clear policies at work so no call or message from them could get through without my knowledge. I made it clear to mutual acquaintances. I wasn't open to reconciliation. I wasn't angry. I was just done. I'd spent too many years chasing validation from people who were never capable of giving it. People who loved control more than connection. People who saw me not as a daughter, but as a return on investment. And now, I had nothing left to prove to them. My company kept growing. I launched a scholarship fund, anonymous at first, for girls from working-class families applying to Ivy League schools. I called it the Silver Fund, a quiet nod to the boat that once defined my failure. Now, it stood for something else entirely: transformation. Not revenge by fire, but by freedom, because real power wasn't watching my parents fall. It was watching myself rise, and knowing they had nothing to do with it. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. It came the first time I walked by a marina and didn't feel rage tightening in my chest. It came when I spoke at a Women in Tech panel and shared my story, this time without trembling hands. It came when a 17-year-old girl, tears in her eyes, said to me after a talk, "My dad told me I'd never get into college, but I just did. And hearing you makes me feel like I'm not crazy for still going." That's when I knew my story wasn't just about revenge. It was about recognition. There are so many of us, children of toxic parents, who spend our entire lives trying to prove we're worthy of basic love. We confuse control for protection, manipulation for discipline, and silence for peace. But the truth is, not every parent deserves the title. And choosing yourself, even if that means walking away, isn't selfish. It's survival. For a long time, I thought forgiveness was about letting them back in. Now I understand. Sometimes forgiveness is simply setting the weight down and walking forward without it. I still have days where the old doubts whisper, where I wonder if I went too far, if cutting them off made me heartless. But then I remember that little girl I used to be, working late into the night with tired eyes and big dreams, believing that if she just worked hard enough, loved well enough, they'd finally choose her over themselves. She deserved better. And now, she has it. A few weeks ago, I visited Yale, just for a day. I walked the campus, watched the students rushing between classes, laughing in the courtyard. I felt no jealousy, no grief, only peace. I sat on a bench with a coffee in hand and smiled. I didn't need those halls to define me anymore, because even though I never got to walk through their gates as a student, I still became everything I was meant to be, and no one could take that from me again. Madison's story isn't just the perfect revenge, it's a powerful reminder. Sometimes the strongest revenge is living well without them. Are you ready for your own journey?